Okay, so I don't think that I've given this as a full-on meditation talk before, but I did write a blog about at least a piece of it a while ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I had no idea what I was going to talk about earlier on this week, but then I thought, well, I've got the perfect topic because I am taking care of my brother's cat. And he used to be our cat. When I first moved to California, we lived together in an apartment over yonder. Some of you guys know this big building that caught on fire, and we had to be evacuated. It was on national news. I found out my building was on fire because one of my friends called me from Michigan because it was on CNN. In any case, this has nothing to do with my cat. Although my cat was in the building, he was fine. But my cat is now my brother's cat, and he's been on many adventures. And I think that animals in general can teach us a lot, but cats in particular, there is a certain kind of attitude, a certain kind of way of being that cats have that we can learn from. Now, I'm not going to say that we should be exactly like cats because cats are cats and we are people. We don't have 4 legs, we have 2 legs and 2 arms. We, have larger brains and we're more self-aware, and there's a lot that we can do that cats can't do. But there is a lot that cats can do that we can't, and that cats do more naturally that we cannot do as naturally. So this is what I want to kind of focus on a little bit. One of the really wonderful things about animals in general, and cats are really like way up there with this, is they have a very easy ability to just act without thinking. Their instinct is very strong, and they're able to respond very quickly in the moment without second guessing. Human beings, without lots of training or with too much training, with the wrong amount of training, which is usually what we have, we are awful at this. We second guess ourselves so much. We are constantly up in our heads. We have a tendency to experience life up here as if all of life in the world is contained in our little skulls, and we have a really hard time reacting quickly or responding well because we second guess. We are always up in here thinking like, oh, is this the right thing to do? I'm not sure. Well, the cat is blissfully unaware of whether what they're doing is the right thing or not. They just do it. I'm going to give you a great example of this. This cat, the cat's name is Blue. He has a name. He's very cute, and he is super quick. When you pull out the laser pointer and you zip it around the floor, he will go from 0 to 100 in an instant. He'll move so quickly and explosively that it's like he's almost so fast you can't see him. This is the way that we want to be with our physical bodies when we practice. We want to be able to move that quickly. And make no mistake, it is a function, first and foremost, of our minds. Because if we were trying to think things through step by step, we will be nowhere near that fast. We get in our own way. And so one of the great things that we can learn from watching a cat is to just get out of our own way and let it flow through us. A cat really embodies this explosive kind of energy. And one of the terms that I've heard in martial arts that tries to describe this is Bajin. And it is like this kind of rolling explosive power. And it doesn't just exist in the limbs. It doesn't really exist in the mind. It comes from the center of your being, and it explodes outwardly. And it's kind of like the closest thing that you will get to it without lots and lots of practice is when you sneeze. And this happens to be the right way to do a good explosive exhale from your center. When you sneeze, it is involuntary, and you get this explosive energy from your diaphragm. It is like your whole body convulsing single pointedly on this thing, and you are getting lots of energy going out from your nose and your mouth, and it's usually disgusting. But this is the kind of you know, instinctive, explosive quality that we want to be able to have. Cats sneeze sometimes too, but they have different, much cuter sneezes than us. I'll give you a terrible example of this. And this brings to mind the phrase that you guys have all heard many times: curiosity killed the cat. And my cat very nearly died by being too curious. And he just reacted without really thinking to this thing that he was curious about. So we were on the 6th floor of this apartment building, and my window was open with the shades drawn, those like blinds, those vertical blinds, and they were kind of getting blown around very, very lightly by the wind. And so my cat jumped from my bed over to the window to see what was up and slipped right out the window and fell 6 floors. And my brother and I came home that day and we're just kind of hanging out, like eating dinner and watching TV. And then an hour or two goes by and we're like, isn't there a cat supposed to be here, like coming up and, you know, rubbing up on us or attacking us? We couldn't find him anywhere. We looked all over the apartment. We looked up and down. We went up 26 flights of stairs, all the way up, all the way down, both sides of the building, went into each floor and looked for him, couldn't find him anywhere. And we went down, I thought like maybe he slipped and fell out of the balcony or jumped out of the window or something. And sure enough, he was down there. Like, it was like, it broke my heart when I found this cat, because he was in a bush. He had like fallen on concrete and then crawled over to a bush. And I actually, when I first saw him, I heard him yelling, and I thought he was okay. But then I saw him try to move, and he had a broken leg. And I saw him, and I was like, "Oh, how could I do? I'm such a bad cat dad." And we took him to the hospital, rushed him to the hospital. And when I tell you how much money we spent to fix this cat's leg, you are going to think that I am lying to you, but I promise you I'm telling the truth. We paid $10,000 to fix this cat's leg. And this is another very important lesson that I learned from my cat is financial responsibility. Have pet insurance if you have a pet, because they are expensive if you want to fix them. There was an option to amputate Blue's leg, and that would have cost $250. But since he was only 3 months old, we felt so bad. Maybe he was 6 months old. We're like, no, we're going to spare no expense. He's the $10,000 cat now, and he loves his life, and he loves his leg, and he can't even tell that anything happened to it. But this is when you go too far to being like a cat, like an animal, and you don't look before you leap. We want to have balance in our lives, right? So we can learn from the mistakes of cats too. We don't want to be quite that rash with our actions. Don't jump out of a window. Look first and see that the window is open. But when he was recovering, he actually had to go in a second time to get the surgery again, because the first one didn't work. His brace thing kind of bent, and he was like wobbling around and on drugs the whole time. He was on painkillers, but he was very resilient. So I have never fully broken anything. I've had like little fractures. I'm knocking on wood right now because I hope it never happens. But I promise you, if I ever break something, you will never hear the end of it. I will complain every day, as much sympathy as I can get from it. But he was just like pretending that it wasn't there. It's kind of too much, and he kind of re-injured it, but just kept going through life. And we had to put a little cone on him so that he wasn't trying to bite it and all that. but he was still like trying to jump and trying to just be totally fine with it. Minus the drugs, he was just his old self. And, you know, cats, they have what I think, accurately describe as an attitude problem. But in this case, he was just like resilient, just kept going and pretended that nothing was wrong. One of the most brilliant things that I've ever heard, and I love it so much that I've repeated it like every month since I heard it, is that when you're meditating, or you're doing Tai Chi, or you're trying to practice Kung Fu with like a moving meditation, you want to pretend that that state that you're trying to get into is like a cat. You cannot chase after it. Because if you try to give a cat lots of affection, most cats at least, you pay too much attention to it, cat wants nothing to do with you. It will slink away and go hide somewhere. And then as soon as you turn away and you ignore the cat, then it'll kind of crawl out and be like, what's going on? How come you're not trying to pet me right now? How come you're ignoring me? And it'll like rub, you know, and it'll kind of climb up on your lap and just like try to get your attention. And it's hilarious, but there is a real kind of deep truth to this. We want to, in the same way that we kind of give the cat some space, we want to do the same thing with our meditation practice and with our moving meditation practice. Because the more we try to chase after it and try to hold on to it, the more that it's going to elude us. And it is because we cannot force this part of our practice. It is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about this with this great story from Budo Secrets, but it is something that can only flow through us, right? In the same way that kind of explosive energy will flow through a cat, we have to let this state flow through us. And the more that we try to grab it, the more it's going to slip through our fingers. So imagine when you're sitting to meditate and you really desperately want to clear your mind, and you try to force it to happen. And your experience of it is like you're trying to force the thoughts away. It's very like anxious. There's a lot of like negative energy there, and it feels like you're trying to get the darkness out of a room by beating it away with a stick. If you're in a dark room, the way to get the darkness out of the room is not to swing a stick wildly or try to push it away. There's no way to force it out. You just flip on the light switch, right? And when we have these kind of eureka moments, or these moments in meditation or in practice where something just clicks for us, it is just like that, where it's like the light has been turned on for us, and it's just like, oh, this is it, right? It's effortless, it happens instantaneously, and it is something that we have to just kind of let happen. So it's like you're sitting there and you've tried long enough to chase after the cat. You've tried long enough to pet it, to get it to love you. It hates you. Just leave it alone. And then eventually it's going to come crawling up and sit in your lap. And when it happens, you're going to be like, well, this, obviously, why didn't I just do that in the first place? This is simultaneously the easiest and most difficult thing that we will ever do. My Sifu used to say all the time, meditation is the highest form of human activity. It is that thing that we really aspire to, yet we have to let go of that which seems to make us human in order to actually experience it and attain that state, right? The ego, the thing that makes us separate, or the thing that holds on to things, the part of us that desperately wants that cat to love us and desperately wants to get into that meditative state, we have to just let it go and just be, right? And then it will happen for us. There is this super long part of this book, Budo Secrets. If you guys haven't read it, it's great. I recommend it. There is this section called The Marvelous Techniques of the Old Cat. And this is an old essay that first appeared in a collection entitled Inaka Soshi, the Country Taoist. It was written in 1927. So I'm going to read part of it and then skip over part of it because we'd be here all night if I tried to do the whole thing. But there once was a swordsman named Shokin. His home was plagued by a huge rat who roamed around freely, even during the day. Shokin's house cat was no match for the rat and fled in terror after being severely bitten. Shokin acquired several tough local polecats to combat the rat in a group. They were released in the house and went for the rat, who crouched in a corner of the room, waiting for them to come. The rat lashed out ferociously at one cat after the other and drove them all off. Angered by the abject failure of the cats, the master decided to dispatch the rat with his sword. Despite his skill as a swordsman, he could not strike the rat. The animal leapt great distances through the air, moved like lightning, and boldly leapt right over the top of the swordsman's head. Shokin gave up in exasperation and decided to seek the aid of the amazing old cat, all capitalized, from a nearby village. So when the owner brought the old cat over to Shokin's house, Shokin was surprised at how ordinary and aged the cat appeared. However, he said, let's give it a try, and released the cat into the room where the rat was ensconced. As soon as it saw the cat approach, the rat froze. The cat nonchalantly walked over, seized the rat by the neck, carried it out of the room, and turned it over to Shokin. He's a very well-trained cat. So that night, the other cats gathered and gave the old cat the seat of honor. They said to him, we are well known for our skill in rat catching, able to handle even weasels and otters, and our nails are razor sharp. However, there was nothing we could do against that rat. How was it that you were able to overcome that giant rat? Please impart to us the secrets of your art. The old cat laughed and said, well, you are all still young, and although you have had experience in fighting with rats, you still have a lot to learn. But before I begin though, tell me about your training. And so then it goes into this long part where each cat comes forward and explains their training, their physical training, their internal training, their training with chi and all of this. And the cat one by one kind of explains how this is great, but it's not quite enough. It's not the full picture. And there is a really great metaphor with this in our own training, right? Each little piece of what we do is not the whole picture. It's only when it kind of comes all together, right? With our meditation and our internal practice as well as our external, and even with just each part of the external part, there are pieces of it that work well together, but only when we have the whole thing. And then we are able to transcend technique. Are we really able to be in this kind of state that we're looking for? So I'm just going to fast forward until he goes to explain his kind of philosophy. This is after he's kind of dismissed all of their experience. He says, it is not my intention to dismiss all of your hard training as worthless. The way has many vessels. Techniques contain universal principles. Key power makes the body function and vivifies the cosmos. Harmonizing power enables one to blend naturally with any attacking force, even rocks, without being broken. This is like, if you guys have heard, this is not in the book, but if you've heard Bruce Lee talk about flowing, being like water, and water can flow and it can crash, and it has this real kind of harmonizing quality to it. This is the way that we want to be. So back to the book. As soon as there is the slightest conscious thought, however, contrivance and willfulness appear, and that separates you from the natural way. You see yourself and others as separate entities, as opponents. You ask me what technique I employ, the answer is Mushin, no mind. Mushin is to act in accordance with nature, nothing else. The way has no limits. So do not think of this talk of mine as the ultimate secret. He goes on and says lots of great stuff. And there's a part where the samurai was hiding behind. He comes out and is like, cat, teach me your secrets and da-da-da. So I'll leave the rest of that for you guys to read for yourself. But what this cat is talking about, Mushin, this is what the wall scroll is up on the wall. This is a state that a cat is really spending a lot more time in than we are. This is something that we need to arrive at through training and just allowing our natural self to be. So when we meditate, there is going to be, especially early on in our practice, there's going to be a real kind of desire to be great at meditation, right? There's going to be a desire to again, force your thoughts out. And the way of transcendence is not by force, but we will get very, very far by practicing and training our minds to go back to the breath in the same way that we decide, I want to keep my hands up when I practice, and I have to keep reminding myself because my hands keep coming down here, and I keep reminding myself, bring the hands up, bring the hands up. Eventually I get it, right? I keep training myself to exhale when I punch, and then eventually it happens naturally. When you have trained yourself to go back to the breath enough times, and you have trained yourself to be with the breath and be with your thoughts wherever they go, and then just allow them to naturally come back to the breath. This is what we're really looking for meditation. It is unlikely that you will get there by just sitting for your first meditation and saying, I'm just going to be great at meditating right now. First of all, again, that's kind of wrapped up in the ego. But second of all, what we find is most often what we train ourselves to do will become what we do more easily, more naturally in the mind, right? Whatever thought we have, that connection, that synapse is strengthened, and it will naturally just go there more and more often. We go back to the breath or whatever it is that your focal point is for your meditation. It could be a mantra, it could be a visualization, whatever it is. Your mind then goes more naturally to that and lets go of whatever else it is that you are attached to. After some amount of training, when you allow your mind to flow, it will naturally flow to that state. And this is the same thing with our physical practice. We train ourselves to do what we want to do. And then we get out of our minds, and instead of thinking our way through and saying, okay, you got to remember to keep your hands up. You got to remember to snap your punch out. You got to remember to exhale. You can't think fast enough. Your body has to just be able to react, to respond to whatever your partner throws at you. In self-defense, you don't have time to think. You have to just move and allow the training that you have spent all of your time doing with your body, allow it to just happen naturally. It flows through you. There is this very curious kind of paradox with this in our practice, where we have to both train and be very diligent and very intentional with our practice, with our body, and with our thoughts. And then we have to be able to just let that go. And that's when it will just click. That's when it will just feel like it's flowing through us. That's when it's going to feel like the cat just wanders over and plops on our lap. You'll just be sitting there, meditating, and it will just happen for you. So the first time that I meditated, I was sitting at Sifu Brown's dojo, my teacher, and he gave a wonderful talk about something. And we sat to meditate, and I was sitting there like, this is great. I'm going to be amazing in meditation. And then I realized I'm terrible at this. I'm never going to get great at meditation. And then I thought, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I'm just supposed to keep coming back to the breath. Keep coming back to the breath. Okay, do that. And then for one moment, I mean like the instant, it was like part of a breath. I actually just felt the breath come in, And maybe I felt the breath go out. And in that moment, in that instant, the rest of me fell away. And it was just the sensation of the breath. It was just the darkness behind closed eyes. It was no thought. It was no ego. It was no logic. It was just being there, right? Like the cat, and like, you with the cat, you're just like one. And then, of course, as soon as that happened, I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm meditating. Is this enlightenment? Am I the next Buddha? And then it disappeared instantly, because then I was thinking and all in the ego and all excited. Just like if a cat comes over to you and sits on your lap and you get all excited and you're like, yeah, and the cat will bite you. This is what my cat does. If you pet it for like a second or you just lay your hand on it, it's totally cool. But then it gets all riled up as soon as you get too excited about petting it. It'll start like actually latching on. And so then I have to just like sit there and just be there with the cat. And our minds are the same way. You get overly excited, and then that part of your mind kind of kicks in, and you start celebrating. The ego gets involved, and you want to just be. So another way to look at meditation could be like the cat is meditating, and you're watching the cat. And the cat will sometimes just chill there. It'll sit there. First of all, my cat sleeps like all day long. But it will be perfectly happy just sitting there and looking at me. And sometimes I'll find myself totally happy just sitting and looking back at the cat. The cat's not sitting there judging me, I hope. The cat's not sitting there thinking about, well, like, what am I going to do next? Well, what am I going to say? This is awkward. We're just sitting here. The cat's just there. If we can meditate and be like we are watching the cat, and let our breath be like it's the cat breathing. When my cat gets real happy, he just sits there and purrs, and it sounds like a chainsaw is going off. He's like, and it's like almost so loud that it like hurts my ears to hear. And it is like, until this cat could not be happier. There's nothing that exists in the world that's happier than this cat right now, except for maybe a dog. But when we are observing that, we want to just observe it and be with it and just let it be exactly as it is. You don't try to change it. You don't try to hold on to it. It's just there. So when we are meditating, one of the best things that we can try to do, at least, is to kind of allow ourselves to separate from ourselves, separate from the ego, and just observe it, right? So observe that thing that is breathing, observe that thing that is thinking without judgment, right? If we look at the cat, we're like, that lazy cat, it's just sitting there. Or we look at the cat after it bit us and we say, I hate you, cat. All of that, this is not the way that we want to be. We just want to watch it. In the same way that the cat then just watches us. If you can just observe the small self, which is the ego, the thing that keeps wanting to have thoughts, the thing that keeps wanting you to get up and do something, the thing that keeps wanting you to perceive yourself as being separate from everybody and everything else. Cat doesn't really have a perception. The cat just is naturally. If we can observe that thing, then what is the thing that is observing? That is kind of your higher self. That is what is beyond ego. If you can just observe yourself sitting there, feel yourself breathing, and observe the thoughts, then you don't hold on to them. And that thing that is having the thoughts isn't you. That's just like an interesting thing for you to look at. And when you are in that kind of orientation, or you're having that relationship with yourself that's having the thoughts, then those thoughts quiet down and they dissipate. And then it is really just like you looking at something that is like a mirror of your own unattached, thoughtless, pure consciousness. And when we observe natural state animals that are just being there and chilling, this is what they're doing. So we're going to try to do that with our meditation tonight. Just watch yourself like you're watching a cat. If you've never watched a cat before, like you're watching a dog, like whatever. And allow that thing to just be its perfect natural self. It is exactly the way that it is meant to be right now. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to change. There's nothing to force. We just observe it without judgments. And see how that goes. And the function of that will often be that we just allow ourselves to keep going back to the breath without judging the breath, without trying to manipulate or change the breath. You just are there with the breath. And allow the natural state to just rise up and just kind of absorb you. And when your mind wanders and you start to have some kind of a judgment or some kind of a sense of separateness or whatever, let that go, come right back to just observing. And a way to do that would be you're having a thought of something. You're thinking like, okay, how long have we been meditating for? I got to go eat. When is this over? Why is this so hard? Kind of go, ooh, that's not me having that thought. I'm just going to observe that thought and let it go, and then come back to the breath. So let's try that now. Sit comfortably.